Hi, everybody. Steve Wilder, Sorensen Wilder and Associates, along with Dan Wilder, my Vice President of Operations and faithful sidekick. Sound like Batman and Robin there. We're doing tonight's video a little bit different, simply because we've got a very special guest with us tonight. Dan and I, over the last few weeks, have had several calls from our clients with compliance questions on life safety issues that are applicable while we're dealing with the coronavirus situation. And when we talk about life safety, there's only one guy I turn to, and that's my dear friend and colleague, Stan Spitic of Fire and Life Safety in Mesa, Arizona. Stan's a nationally recognized expert on life safety compliance, very, very well versed in CMS applicabilities. And Dan, I think it's exciting to have Stan joining us, even though him sitting there telling us about how great his weather is in Mesa today was kind of depressing.
Yeah, I can live without hearing that when we're dealing with rain and cold again. But
Steve,
yeah,
I just had to put my air conditioner on. My AC is on.
Oh, that's killing me. That's killing me. You know, the first thing I did when I got here today was I turned the heat up in this building. So, well, let's talk about life safety compliance, Dan. These are some pretty unique times dealing with the COVID-19 thing.
Yeah.
Should providers, first question I've got to ask, and I've had this a lot, all of them have some form of emergency operation plan. Should they be considering any type of modifications in their emergency operation plan in regards to life safety?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that is really on the top of providers' minds right now. And why would you want to do any kind of modifications or additions to your emergency operation plan when we're talking life safety? One of the concerns that I have, and based on the questions that I continuously get from clients and providers from around the nation, as well as state healthcare associations, is what can we do to mitigate potential deficiencies that might arise out of COVID-19 management? Meaning, what if we miss a fire drill? What if we have to modify one of our procedures? What if we've got to change the use of an area? To the best of our understanding, information that surveyors, accrediting agencies, and other authorities having jurisdiction need to help mitigate any deviation that a provider has from strict compliance with the code would require that they make changes to their EOP, their emergency operation plan, that would cite the need to make those types of deviations. Meaning, if you're going to change your operations in some way, we're going to get into some questions specific to those changes and those deviations from strict compliance. If you put a provision in your EOP that states that under an emergency condition, during a declared emergency, this facility or this organization may have to X, Y, Z, as long as you kind of mitigated that by acknowledging it in advance of an emergency, to the best of our understanding, surveyors will mitigate any potential deficiency that could be born out of COVID-19 or any infectious disease management.
That's good counsel.
so, Stan, another question we're being asked often is, what are some of the common things that we're seeing about means of egress?
You know, the means of egress, and as the three of us know, being, firefighters and former firefighters, the means of egress in an emergency is the difference between life or death. And so much of the life safety code focuses on exiting. I mean, I think the original edition of the life safety code was named differently and had a reference to exits. It was, I think, the National Exiting Code or something similar. And the needs that are being identified in our typical care centers, our health care centers, our nursing homes, hospitals, and clinics, sometimes require the means of egress to be used in a very dynamic way. The delivery of supplies, the creation of stations that are going to scan people in and out of your building, things that typically wouldn't be in a corridor or a hallway or near an exit are now arising at those areas. So we want to make sure that we're keeping our exits clear, that we are not compromising the means of egress in any way that it's unsafe. We don't want to create an obstacle course Maybe we need that screening station at an entry into the facility, but there needs to be protocols and provisions in place to remove those obstructions or anything that compromises the means of egress during an emergency. Of course, that would be when the fire alarm sounds, when there's a condition of smoke or fire in the building, or any reason to potentially evacuate, even in these challenging times. Your means of egress is sacred and it's got to be maintained.
Okay.
That's excellent. That's excellent. One of the questions, Stan, that kind of piqued my interest a little bit, and it's not so applicable to our long-term care clients, but more so to hospital clients that we have. Many of the hospitals have monitoring or screening points set up at the entries where they're screening people coming in for temperature, et cetera. Any concerns about those?
Yeah, it's back to basics, Chief or Steve. It's a matter of making sure that if you put a table, a couple of chairs, you've got some clinicians, you've got someone that's taking temperatures, logging people in, logging people out, doing all the good due diligence that they need to fight this infectious disease. You've got to remember that in an emergency, the exit is critical. And, you know, if I were a surveyor or you guys were walking through a building doing some consultation for our clients and we saw some type of compromise or obstruction at the exit point, even if it's got a purpose, we want to make sure that providers are training people to remove those devices, to make sure that they're not going to be a true conflict in an emergency. And like I just said earlier to Dan's question, we've got to protect that means of egress at all times.
Excellent.
Stan, you mentioned a few times about the fire alarms, and it got me thinking about the fire drills. Are quarterly fire drills still required on all shifts?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. One of the most common questions that I'm getting, whether it's a maintenance director, an administrator, or I just got a call from a DSD regarding fire drills at her facility. I get these panic calls where people will say, Stan, we're not going to be able to do our monthly fire drill for April because my administrator just does not want to deal with that kind of chaos of our emergency. Here's the thing that you've hit on loud and clear, Dan. The requirement for fire drills per CMS, as enforced by NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code, is quarterly fire drills, not monthly fire drills. That means we do one drill per shift per quarter. Now, most, and not most, but many hospitals and nursing homes and healthcare facilities that abide by these regulations that we work with have gotten into the practice of satisfying the quarterly fire drill requirement by doing a drill monthly. The first month of the quarter, they do the first shift. The second month of the quarter, they do the second shift, and so on. To mitigate this immediate situation that we all find ourselves in, there's a little bit of good news. Right now, the beginning or mid-April, we are in the midst of the second quarter. No healthcare facility regulated by the Life Safety Code, if they're following a calendar year, has to do another fire drill until you get to the end of the quarter. So we're talking the last week of June. And if you wanted to, you could do it the last day of June, and you can do all three drills if you actually have three shifts on the same day, as long as they're not predictable, unannounced, and they're random. So it's a big misnomer that you have to do monthly fire drills, one per shift per quarter.
Good.
So I could do all three on June 30th.
Correct. And the other thing that our providers need to remember, and I know many of them know this, per NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code, if you do a drill on a second shift after 9 p.m., you can do a silent drill. So you can further mitigate the fear of activating the alarm in the midst of COVID-19 management or any other emergency for that matter. Do your second drill shift, at least the second quarter, after 9 p.m. So that way, the only time you'll have to actually activate your alarm is potentially during your first shift drill. If you do your second shift drill after 2100 hours and before 0600 hours on your third shift drill, you don't even have to activate the alarm during the second quarter round of fire drills.
Excellent. One of the many commonalities that I think all of the viewers of this program are going to be sharing is the effort to keep non-essential personnel out of the building right now. What about vendors, such as those that are coming and providing required service, like the inspection, testing, and maintenance of the fire protection system or other life safety systems? How do we manage that?
Well, in my experience, dealing with providers daily, it's about a 50-50 shop right now. I'm working with some providers that as long as those vendors, let's say it's your sprinkler contractor coming in to do quarterly service on your system, as long as they're properly screened, many providers will consider, and you should, because it's your sprinkler system, will consider your sprinkler system and people that maintain your sprinkler system as essential. And as long as they're abiding by the playbook, that they are screening as to be safe to come in your building, you're going to be allowed to let them in if that's what you want to do. If you've got a little bit of a different posture and you don't want to have someone like that in right now because of the fight that you're fighting to control infection in your facility, you might be able to defer that IMT or ITM, inspection, testing, and maintenance. But here again, it goes back to the earlier point. If you write it into your emergency operations plan that some elements of life safety code compliance may have to be deferred during a declared emergency like inspection, testing, and maintenance, maybe you can change that schedule. And here's something that I'm going to read directly. And, you know, it's a little bit in the weeds, but I think providers and your clients want to hear this, Steve. So many people get hung up on what's the definition of weekly, monthly, quarterly, and so forth. According to NFPA 72, which provides pretty specific guidance, weekly means 52 times per year, once per calendar week. Monthly means 12 times per year, once per calendar month. Quarterly means 4 times per year, with a minimum of 2 months and a maximum of 4 months in between inspection, testing, and maintenance. Semi-annual means twice per year with a minimum of 4 months and a maximum of 8 months. And of course, annual means once per year with a minimum of 9 months and a maximum of 15 months. Now, we've all had experiences with surveyors. We as consultants and our folks on the line today as providers, and we know that enforcement can be variable. But if you mitigate it by writing it into your plan that you might have to deviate from these strict schedules, and if you do it, I think with a level of logic and being reasonable, hopefully you're not going to see deficiencies. Bottom line is this: your systems have to be maintained. As critical as the hallway, our fire suppression system, our alarm systems, our generators, they need to be maintained. It's just a matter of managing it.
Excellent.
So Steve, with everybody having such a focus on infection control right now,
Yeah.
What do the providers need to know regarding the use and storage of alcohol-based hand rub solutions within the facility?
You know, I remember I was visiting a facility long before COVID-19 in northern Arizona. And it took me 1 second to realize that they must be dealing with a infection control issue, because somebody went around on both sides of the corridor, pretty much every 10 foot on center, slapped up an ABA, alcohol-based hand rub dispenser. And the volume that individually each of those dispensers in the hallway represented clearly exceeded the limit that's allowed in a smoke compartment in a healthcare facility. So what you need to know is that you are limited to 10 gallons of aggregate solution within the means of egress or in common areas of any individual smoke compartment. Now there's some good news here. You're allowed to put 1 dispenser of appropriate size in a resident's room or a patient's room. That dispenser in the resident's or patient's room does not count towards that 10-gallon aggregate. If you understand the principle of an ABHR solution, it could be up to 95% alcohol. So we're talking about a flammable liquid. We want to make sure that we limit our flammable liquids to the amount that's allowed, 10 gallons per smoke compartment in the hallway or common area, and 1 dispenser in each patient or resident room. But when it comes to storage, for convenience purposes, you might say, well, we'd like to have some bulk storage in our patient care area, maybe even in a storage room. You're only allowed to store 5 gallons of this solution in an appropriate container outside of an approved cabinet. Meaning, if you're storing more than 5 gallons in a smoke compartment within your facility, which I'm hoping you're not, it's got to be an approved flammable liquids locker. Sounds like you want to say something there, Steve.
Oh, you took the words out of my mouth. I hope you're not.
Yeah.
I always get very nervous about storing flammable liquids inside the building, but that's my own bias and a couple of experiences from years back in the fire service. So,
another thing to consider, Steve. You want to make sure that you're not installing the ADHR, whether it's in a resident or patient room or hallway, within 1 inch, hopefully farther than 1 inch, of an ignition source, like an outlet or a switch, and that you would have at least 10 feet of horizontal distance between your dispensers. And they should probably pretty much all be on one side of the hallway, but if they're on both sides, that's okay. But keep in mind that the Life Safety Code limits you, in accordance with ADA requirements, to a 4-inch protrusion outside of a wall within an 8-foot corridor. So, any of your clients certainly can reach out to you or me directly if they've got specific questions.
You mentioned storage a minute ago, and I know that's a nightmare and a challenge for everybody right now. People for normal day-to-day use prior to this pandemic, their storage facilities for the most part were adequate, but now inventory control, demands for inventory, excess storage, any words of wisdom, how we can manage all that excess storage requirements?
Yeah, you're right, especially in a newer building, where a newer building is value engineered, meaning, they try to limit as much space to areas that don't produce revenue as much as possible. And what's one of the first things to go? It's storage.
Right.
So storage needs to be in compliance. It needs to be neat, orderly, in a sprinkler building, which all of our healthcare facilities should be. Although you might have some assisted living clients or independent living clients that might have some properties that are not fully sprinklered. But in our sprinkler building, we want to maintain that 18 inches of clearance below the sprinkler head. We want to make sure that we provide appropriate egress. We don't clog up that storage room, that if somebody was in the back of the room and let's say some of the storage items fell or there was an emergency, we don't want people to be trapped in there. The storage room is required to have a self-closing door. Typically, that storage room is a 1-hour assembly with a 3/4-hour door with a self-closer on it. You and I and Dan say this all the time when we do our mock surveys. Storage rooms are propped open. We see rubber bands holding them up, shoestrings. We see wedges. That storage room is a hazardous area, and we want to make sure that it's completely protected. If you have to, let's take a long-term care facility, for example. Let's say they've got a miraculous supply of PPE being delivered to their facility, and they want to take one of their empty resident rooms and convert it to a storage room. Back to our EOP, if they write it into their emergency operation plan, that in an emergency, they might have to use a resident room for storage capacity, even though that door might not have a self-closer, even though it might not be a 1-hour rated room, as long as you provide that provision of the change of use that you intend on using during an emergency in your EOP, again, it might mitigate a deficiency.
Okay.
Interesting. What are the providers need to know about setting up isolation provisions in the facility?
This fight that our providers are in to try to keep their staff and their residents and patients healthy is kind of leading down a road where, whether it's a room, a series of rooms, or a wing of the facility are being used kind of as an isolation unit. Our hospitals pretty clearly have got isolation units that are already set up. It's that conversion to an ISO unit in a long-term care facility that I'm most concerned about. I get a lot of calls from providers, can you just put some heavy-duty visqueen over our fire doors? Can we put up some type of barrier? You know, back again to the overwhelming theme of what I'm trying to say today. Write it into your emergency operation plan that if there is a declared emergency and you've got to integrate in provisions to segregate your building, you know, think about it in these terms. Forget about an infectious disease situation that we find ourselves in. Many providers are going to have some renovation or new construction happening in their building. They build that barrier to segregate the building from dust and other things that go on during the construction or demolition process. Those types of designs can be incorporated in your building, provided that you write it into your plan, provided that it's temporary and that it can be removed in an emergency evacuation, provided that you train your staff on the use of this thing that might provide some type of barrier, whether it's a plastic barrier with a zipper, whether it's something that might have a door built into it. You've got to train your staff, and you need to do something called an alternate life safety measure, meaning that you've got to write a separate plan that identifies the alternate life safety measures that are in place to accommodate this barrier that wasn't built into your building in accordance with the listing.
So you just can't pop up the barrier and think you're in good shape.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got a good friend. We've got a good friend that we work with and a colleague in Illinois that has integrated that into his building, and it's very professionally done. It's not permanently affixed to the hallway. It kind of just uses some pressure with a collapsible frame, with a doorway, with an exit sign. He's trained everybody that works on that floor how to use it, how to take it down, and they've got everything documented. So they're not within strict compliance with the life safety code by having that assembly in place, but he did make a revision to his emergency operation plan, acknowledging the need for this, and then they trained everybody how to use it.
Okay. We got time for just a couple more questions, Stan. I had a call a couple weeks ago, and it really caught me off guard when it came in because it was something I hadn't even thought about. But long-term care facility called, and they were contemplating attempting to create negative pressurization in one of the wings. First time I had really heard of that, I think I felt like they were grasping at straws. They were wanting to talk about using fans and doors to blow out. Thoughts on negative pressurization?
Yeah, certainly we're not engineers. We've got people that can address it specifically if client needs arise. But this is what I'd like our audience to hear loud and clear. CMS has clearly said that utilization of negative pressure is not required at this time for the management of COVID-19. Back to that client.
Say that again. Let me interrupt you. Say that again.
The use of negative pressure is not required for the management of COVID-19.
Okay, thank you.
But some people are electing to do it. Now, whether they're trying to hedge their bet, whether they're trying to create maybe the safest environment of care, we are working with clients collectively, both Sorensen Wilder and Fire and Life Safety, that have integrated negative pressure, or at least a concept that tries to mirror negative pressure into their facility. They had their HVAC contractor work with the balancing and the pressurization of the facility. They're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, but I think what they're trying to accomplish is a reduction in an airborne presence, and it can be done probably to the letter of the law. And if one of us were an engineer, we'd probably get into a very technical discussion on how it can or can't be done based on an existing building. But again, the message that we wanted our audience to hear today is that it is not required.
Excellent.
Very good.
Dan, you have other questions for Stan?
Yeah, the last one I've gotten, it was actually a call I got today, was has CMS issued any waivers for 1135? Or 1130?
For the management of COVID-19, CMS, as all providers know, have issued a waiver on some of the clinical levels of care and the things that you're doing in accordance with regulatory compliance. But we want you to hear this loud and clear also. There has, as of this moment, been no 1135 waiver issued for life safety compliance or compliance with the emergency preparedness rules of participation. So the E tags and the K tags, you know, I think the expectation is going to be this. You know, I think optimistically, providers might be thinking, well, maybe they'll be pretty lenient on us in our next survey, given the challenges that we've all had to deal with. I'm getting the sense that the expectation of surveyors is going to be, we're going to be tougher in review, and we are sheltering in place. And now all of those critical and vital life safety systems that we rely on so much in a healthcare facility are required to work. So we're expecting you to do your fire drill, to do your inspection, testing, and maintenance, maintaining your means of egress. So there's no 1135 waiver, but kind of, and if you haven't understood this, based on the theme that we're kind of just really promoting today, the way to mitigate strict compliance is to write it into your plan as a provision that under emergency conditions, we are going to probably have to vary from strict compliance. And Steve, I think you want us to make this clear. That's our opinion. That's our best understanding of the situations, and it's our best advice that we're giving our compliance and those that are comfortable.
So I guess what I'm hearing is rules are rules, and we have to continue to abide by them. Is that a fair summation?
You know, one of the things that you've heard me, we've presented together many times. We present on security, OSHA, active shooter. I present on life safety and emergency preparedness. One of the things that you've heard me promote in the past is it shouldn't be compliance for compliance sake. Yes, you got regulations. Yes. For example, skilled nursing facilities are only second to the nuclear power industry when it comes to regulation and oversight. But compliance, in our minds, as pragmatic practitioners, equates to a safe environment of care. If you're compliant with your drills, if you're maintaining your equipment the way that you're supposed to, if you're achieving compliance, not only theoretically, but practically speaking, you're going to have a safe and compliant building.
Excellent.
Stan, any other closing words of wisdom?
You know, I think we included a lot of information in a short amount of time. I think you want to work with your consultants. I think you want to work with your state healthcare associations. There's a lot of good information out there. Would you agree with this? Our clients and the folks that we work with are just saturated with information. It's pretty much information overload. I mean, we've got a lot of good stuff to say, just like our industrial hygienists do, our clinicians do. But I think we just want to stay in our lane and focus on what we know and help you in any way that we possibly can.
Well, and that's exactly where we're coming from, Stan. We can't be on site right now for obvious reasons, but we want to be a resource to our clients. We value them. We know that at some point this is going to be over and we can get back to some form of business as usual. But in the meantime, we don't want them to think we're not in their corner and that we're not here for them, you know, when they have questions. So, you know, that is a great closing comment because that was one I would probably make anyway. I made it in the last video. I'll probably make it in every one of them. Friends, I hope this has been of some value to you. I know we went well over time of what we normally try to do, but this is just such a hot topic right now and everybody's got a lot of questions. Stan, I truly appreciate your taking time. You and I are so close and share no secrets. I'm not hesitant to let everybody know that you were kind enough to get out of the swimming pool and put your umbrella drink down to come and do this program with us this afternoon. And I know where you and the family will be in seclusion this afternoon as we wrap it up. But joking aside, I do really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. My best to you and the family. And hopefully this will be behind us soon and we'll be back on the road together.
Sounds good.
Take care, Stan. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Call us if you need anything. We're here for you. 800-568-2931. And as you hear me say all the time, stay safe and stay in touch.
Bye.